Miller, Lev Gross, Charles Bock, and Glenn Kenny, here tonight to help us celebrate David Foster Wallace's The Pale King. We are honored to host this event as David was one of our favorites. We thank you for being here tonight. Laura Miller is the book critic for Salon and contributor to The New Yorker, The New York Times Book Review, and The Wall Street Journal, as well as the author of The Magician's Book, A Skeptic's Adventures in Narnia. Lev Grossman is the book critic for Time magazine and the author of the best-selling novel, The Magicians. Charles Bock is the author of the novel Beautiful Children, which was a New York Times bestseller and won the Sue Kaufman Prize for First Fiction from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. And Glenn Kenny was a critic and editor at the film magazine Premiere. One of his first assignments for the magazine was editing the essay David Lynch Keeps His Head, which would later appear in David's collection, A Supposedly Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again. He is currently chief critic at MSN Movies.
He's also Dick Dill, from the famous adult film essay.
Yes.
So you know.
I have a business card to that effect.
Following their discussion, I'll pass around a microphone if anyone would like to ask questions of the readers or share their thoughts. Please join me in welcoming Laura, Lev, Charles, and Glenn to the Strand.
Thanks, everyone. You might have noticed there's 4 of us, and there's no moderator. So we had a little discussion beforehand about how things they should go, and we more or less, I think, decided that they should just go. That we'll be going with a sort of tornadic structure to this conversation, to use a Wallace word. And I thought maybe we should each, the 4 of us, just talk briefly, a little bit, about what we think The Pale King is about and what we think about it. It has a very kind of Rorschach-y quality. I feel as though everybody who gazes into it sees something slightly different. So I'm curious as to what everybody else saw when they gazed into it. Charles, do you want to start?
No. Nothing. Are all the mics bad or just?
I think you press the button. I think it might.
How about now?
No, now and hold.
We're going to share.
Yeah, why not?
Why don't we just?
No, it's gone green now.
Oh, okay.
That's
now better. See, throwing things. That's what works. I would not want to. I don't particularly want to start, but I'll say this. There's things in this book that are as good as anything the guy did. And there's things that are really not. And it's very much, it's nowhere near a finished novel, would be my read. And the order that we're presented is, you know, Michael did a tremendous amount of work and a lot of, you know, a lot of thought went into presenting something to make it readable. But the way it doesn't advance and the way that there's not a natural progression in the idea of what we think of as a plot, I think that the infrastructure or the architecture of the book was evolving, and he was figuring that out. And since it is very much a book about boredom and about how we're, and you know, equating that with kind of our cultural, you know, our cultural where we're at and where, you know, bureaucratic life, and how we're supposed to get through this and connect or not connect with one another. There's a natural problem in that David was very much a high-end literary writer and conceptual genius, and for a plot, something happens. Boredom is the opposite of something happening, and this was something I think that he was very much wrestling with, and which for a long time, because I heard him read from this book at the New Yorker Festival in 2002. And I don't think that the last year of his life was any help in wrestling with what he was doing. And I think we're very lucky to have this, what's here. And it's not the first thing anyone should read by the guy. And I'm going to stop there because I feel like I've kind of rambled a little bit. But thank you for listening to me, and thank you for showing up tonight.
I guess I'll just add to that. It is very strange. It's very weird reading a book that you know to be unfinished. You're not. There's that sense of a controlling intention that you feel behind a novel. It's absent from this. You know, there isn't a mind behind it saying, and this goes here, and this goes here, and you know that this goes here for a reason because some guy decided that it would go there. It isn't clear that Wallace had made very many decisions about the book. When he died, at the end of the book, there's a little bit. There's a set of notes, extremely helpful. In fact, it's almost good to read them first about his thoughts about where things might have been going. There's a lot of question marks in there. The sentences tend to end with a question mark. So reading it, it's funny. I relaxed in a certain way because I wasn't waiting for anything to happen because I knew it wouldn't, and if it did, it wouldn't finish happening by the time I got to the end of the book. So the book becomes weirdly organized, not around a narrative at all, but around an idea. And for me, the idea that it coalesced around is this idea of boredom and how and why it arises. And how you fight it. And there's almost this strangely sort of MacGuffin-like state of mind that the characters flirt with, and it sort of comes and goes throughout the book, where some of them make peace with boredom and somehow stop asking from the world to be entertained, and instead start, and at that moment they kind of it sort of blooms for them. They start seeing a richness in it that they didn't see before. That was my experience reading it, and what it felt like it was about. But again, it's funny. It's a document. It's pages found in a suitcase. It doesn't have that organizing intention you think of novels as having. So there's an extent to which you kind of have to give it one yourself.
This is definitely true. There's this way that when the book is finished and something is there, you can say, okay, I really don't know what's going on, but there has to be some kind of meaning behind this element being present, or these two things matching, or these two things being next to each other. And there probably is some meaning, but it's probably more Michael Peach's meaning maybe than David Wallace's. And he had some understanding of how David thought, but not obviously a perfect one. And I don't think he knew that much about Dave Wallace's intentions for this particular book. But in a way, that the situation that you're in, where you're thinking, okay, here's this. I mean, I felt like this with his finished work, that there'd be something there on the page, and I'd be thinking, what the hell is this supposed to mean? And then I'd be confident that if I thought about it long enough, there would be something there because somebody smart and talented put it there. And in this case, you don't know. And in a weird way, to me, there's a kind of strange and, in a way, pleasing harmony between that and the subject matter of his last two. I mean, this work and Oblivion, the story collection that came before that, because for me, Oblivion was a book about suffering and our ability to find any kind of meaning in it without consciously lying to ourselves, or the various ways that people approach finding some meaning in suffering and the fear that there isn't any meaning. And in a way, that boredom plays the same role in A Pale King that suffering does in Oblivion. Like, is there any meaning to this suffering? Is there any meaning to this boredom? I mean, in a way, boredom and meaning are the opposite of each other. And we know that the IRS and taxes are important, and and they have some significance, and yet we're bored by them. So there's this kind of strange paradox. It's very meaningful. It's how we pay for our government, and it has this role of being what's required from a citizen, you know, on a minimal level, in contributing to the community that the citizen lives in. But yet, you know, when we try to think about it, we can't find any meaning in it. And so there's some crazy way that the dilemma that you have as a reader, always wondering if any of these particular elements mean something, or whether they would have been taken out, or whether they would have been changed, or whether there would have been something else in the book added later that, when it was finished, that would suddenly make this make sense or seem more meaningful, is the same situation that the author was in trying to write it.
Well, let me straighten you all out here. No. I am not finished with the book because I'm reading it slowly because I'm getting a lot of pleasure out of his voice, and it's a voice I love and a voice I miss. But I was struck while reading the section, chapter 9, the ostensible author's foreword, by several things. I don't know how many of you have read the book all the way through, but hopefully you've gotten to this part. But you know, there's that part that begins, author here, meaning the real author, the living human holding the pencil, not some abstract narrative persona. And already you're thinking, okay, granted there is sometimes such a persona in the Pale King, but etc. But this right here is me as a real person, David Wallace, age 40, social security number 975042012, addressing you from my Form 8829 deductible home office at 725 Indian Hill Boulevard, Claremont, 91711, California, on this 5th day of spring 2005, to inform you of the following. All of this is true. This book is really true. But of course it's not, because in 2005 Dave was 42 years old, not 40. Now we go back to the opening epigraph of the book, and it's from a piece called Borges and I, which most of us know is a piece by Jorge Luis Borges, only the quoted piece is by Frank Biddard. And it is a piece called Borges and I by Frank Biddard, who is a poet. And the poet says, "We fill pre-existing forms, and when we fill them, we change them and are changed." Whereas the actual short story Borges and I ends with the sentence, "I do not know which of us is writing this sentence." And reading these passages and reading the footnotes in section 9 about the legal vetting of the of this memoir / novel, whatever it is, I was reminded of the experience of working with Dave on a piece called Big Red Sun, which ran in premiere in '98 under the title Neither Adult Nor Entertainment, because we magazine editors don't like these elusive, you know, essay titles that allude to Victoria Williams songs. But we had to do substantial legal vetting on this piece, and one of the problems with it was the fact that Dave wrote it under a pseudonym. He wrote it under a dual pseudonym, the pseudonym of Willem de Groot and Matt Rundlet. He invented characters. His two docents and guides through the world of porn are characters named Dick Filth and Harold Hecuba. These two characters are composite fictions. One of them is based on myself. The other one is based on Evan Wright, who later went on to become the highly acclaimed author of Generation Kill, but at the time was stuck in a very depressing and dead-end job doing investigative journalism for Hustler magazine. The reason that Dave named him Harold Hecuba was as a way of encouraging Evan, because Harold Hecuba is the name of the character played by Phil Silvers on a particular episode of Gilligan's Island. He's the only character in the history of that show to get off the island. Now, we're dealing with essentially a piece of fact, a factual essay that is largely fiction. For instance, there's a part in which Harold Hecuba describes being assaulted by a real porn star named Jasmine St. Clair. Actually, the way he has it in the footnote is he has Dick Filth telling the story secondhand about Harold Hecuba. So let me just read this quickly.